Once again, we all gather around to hear the tale of good and evil, the ever ongoing tale of good and evil as we look at Bitcoin in the short, medium, long term as to what price action is most likely to do and the devious plans that are likely overlaid, I don't know, in the next couple of weeks here. Anyways, the picture is about to get, as usual, a little bit more complicated, but first it's going to get a bit more boring. Anyways, to address that, I do want to go back to the daily price statistics, and then we'll go over, of course, the setups that we have been looking at over the past 3 weeks and how those are evolving and what the sort of next segment of this picture does look like. So first things first, daily price statistics, we can see that Thursday is the outright most likely day of any weekday to close negatively, with just over 56% of all Thursdays closing negatively since this bull market began in 2023. As always, we don't actually care so much about that. What we really care about is the average percent gain and the average percent loss for Thursdays. And we can see that Bitcoin on Thursday, on average for the losing Thursdays, typically closes about one spot 80% away from that open. And that would put Bitcoin today at around 112, 300-ish region, basically the lows of August from back in like literally the first couple of days of August right on over here. Now, of course, the upside of Bitcoin were to play out a nice little bounce, which I actually do think Bitcoin will bounce relatively soon, then that actually would put Bitcoin somewhere around 116,500. Now, I don't think that that's happening today, just to be like super, super blunt with it. But ultimately, you know, if we're looking at it today, does Bitcoin maybe put in a wick to the downside and then bounce off of this lower boundary? Probably yes. We've seen this many times. And again, if you are a more short-term time frame scalper looking for, you know, quick intraday plays, I think this indicator right here, the a part of the caretaker's indicator suite, is just so fucking underslept on. I mean, Jesus Christ, man, this thing calls the bounces, both pullbacks and bounces, super, super consistently, except in moves of like actual breakdowns like we saw back on over on Tuesday. But even then, I mean, there was an intraday play with that, if you recall from that video. Anyways, moving on from there, I do want to go back to one of the major setups that was giving us a bias towards downside. And that one has now been fulfilled. We did see this setup play out, the interplay between the red moving average and the yellow moving average. When they cross the downside, Bitcoin has a gravitational pull towards that green moving average right here. And throughout this whole bull market cycle since 2023, this has played out 13 times, and 11 times it actually has been profitable, including this past one. Now, again, I would not say that this is like a strategy to be played at face value, but it does give us good indication as a good directional indication for Bitcoin. And that has now already played out. So, you know, before we were saying, hey, even if you're super bullish, it's probably better to be waiting a little bit until we at least see another retest down around here. We have now seen that as of yesterday. And so what next effectively? So for this, I want to go back to the past iterations that were somewhat similar to the current one that we have. And when I say somewhat similar, I mean that they had a rally in between before hitting that target down to the green moving average. And we'll see what happens after that target was hit. So the most recent one was back here in June. You can see that Bitcoin rallied first, came down, hit the green moving average, and then was basically straight up from there. In fact, from the low over the next 7 days, it was up 10.5%, which I do think is rather interesting. The other sort of iteration that was quite similar to the current one that we have that had a rally in between, like this one right here, also put in a nice rally about 7 days after that test to the green moving average of about 23%, again, within the next week, actually making the high in January of this year. So pretty significant rally right there. You know, so far we have 10 and 20, what was it, 25%? That's a lot. That sounds like too much, man. That's too much. That's too much. 16.5%. We'll measure it from the close of that day, make it look a little bit better. Anyways, and then we have one of the iterations with this setup that played out kind of similar to the one that we're currently looking at. Again, this one over here stayed effectively at the lows and even dipped a little bit lower. So I'm not saying that this one can't dip a little bit lower in the short term, but over the next 19 days, it did put in a rally of about 7.25% and then fell over again, actually, initiating yet another entry on that strategy. So, you know, if we're looking at this right here, do I expect a bounce from this region before like any major continuation to the downside? Yes, but don't get that statement confused with the long term here, because I do think Bitcoin does have more downside overall. But as of right now, you know, Bitcoin again hit this target back on over, actually officially on Tuesday's wick low. If we were to fast forward 7 days, which were the past 2 iterations, you know, if Bitcoin were to add on even 5%, that puts Bitcoin back at around, you know, 118,500. And then of course, you know, if it were to go for one of those crazy numbers like 10%, that puts Bitcoin basically at the prior all-time high, 123,500 bucks. I do personally think that that's a lot less likely. I do think that this one does come down later on, but do we get a bounce in between? Yeah, I think that that's, you know, kind of somewhat relevant to be expecting here, simply because of this. I mean, Bitcoin has been basically straight down to this target, 10% in 5 days, without any any green closures in between. In fact, now that I recognize it, if you're familiar with Jason Pizzino's brother, Michael Pizzino, probably bad to say it in that way because it's like it's Jason Pizzino's brother. No, Michael Pizzino. I know both of them. They're great guys. Really enjoy their company, and also they're really good like in what they do. But one of Michael Pizzino's main drivers for analysis that I found to work really well is when you have 3 down days from the high, so 3 red days after making a new high. Those typically indicate and precede some major reversals in the market. So we did just see 1, 2, 3 days down. And for reference, the last time that we saw 3 days down was back on over here. This one actually wasn't exactly from the high, but it did precede this major correction. Then of course we did see this one over here back in December/January of this year. This one 3 days down from the high, boom, big corrective period. And then of course we go back to what was it, March of 2024, 1, 2, 3 days down from the high, and big 6-7 month long corrective period emerges. And I actually do think that that's probably what we're going to get here. Maybe not 6 to 7 months, but somewhere in the span of like 3 to 6 months, let's say. And to be fair, we've already spent more than a month in this current range. So maybe it's another, 3, 4, 5 months, whatever it ends up being. I don't fucking know the timing of it. That's very, very difficult to do. But I do think that we're in for, some boringness sideways and likely downside as well with bounces in between. And, Bitcoin could bounce here. I mean, shit, there's even a meta signal setup that actually I completely forgot to bring up here. So let me just bring it up in the background one moment. This one just fired off, or let me just go to my profile. There we go. By the way, I've actually been a lot more active on X. I really enjoyed. In fact, I just basically mute everyone. so I don't see any information I don't want to see. That's the way to do X. Anyways, complete blind spots. Anyways, so meta signals have had like a super, super crazy run these past couple months. Feels like every fucking target that they've in every setup that they've laid out has worked out, whether this be the upside and the downside. So look, these are at the end of the day only statistically based. So look, they're gonna fail. And of course, you've been looking at this for a long time. You've seen plenty of failures. But this signal did fire off, and it is more of a trend trading signal. It's for the 8-hour time frame, and it is giving a target number. It fired off at about 114. It's giving a target number 1 at 119. And target number 1, you can see the win rate here. So the probability of it actually getting hit is about 74.75. So, I mean, I guess it's not that crazy, if Bitcoin were to pop back above there or somewhere around there. I do think target number 2 and target number 3, pretty crazy. Those would obviously be massively new all-time highs. The probabilities of these significantly lower, obviously. But look, at the end of the day, I am very agnostic to what these say. The probabilities are the probabilities. Personally, I don't think Bitcoin's going to make a new high from here on a bounce. I do think it likely will bounce, after some sideways at the lows, because everyone's at the moment getting extremely bearish. It seems like everyone who's still around, pretty much most people are gone. But yeah, this one on average takes about 5.5 bars to reach target number 1. So 5.5 bars on an 8-hour time frame is what? That's 40 hours. So that's under 2 days, and that one just fired off. So that would basically be between like today basically Friday, which we do have Jackson's hole. I love Jackson's bung hole. I'm very much excited for it. Hopefully it's a green dildo that emerges. But yeah, maybe that coincides with that. But I should also acknowledge that the stop loss here is very, very wide. Very, very wide, I should add. This one's at 108,800. Obviously a trade like this, setup like this needs some room to breathe. Because it is more of a trend trading setup. It's probably grabbing the last major low. So yeah, anyways, moving on from there, one of the other major targets that we were looking at has also been hit, which I, for some reason, do not have on my chart. It was based off the HPDR indicator. Fuck, I'm like massively unprepared for today's video, but it is what it is. Anyways, weekly time frame over here, I want to acknowledge several different things. One, for the pattern bros of the world, there is a rising pizza here, and it does look like it is breaking down, pending this week's closure. Anywhere below basically 117, and that will be confirmed, or sorry, even like 119 at this point will be confirmed. Still about 3 days left to go in the week, so a lot can happen, but right now looking pretty nasty. And then more importantly, and then of course the intended target for that would be somewhere down around mid 100s, like 105, 106 region. But on top of that, we also see a couple of things here on the 5-day time frame for the MACD. We see 1, one, two, three drives, or actually four, 1, 2, 3, 4 drives of bearish divergence on the MACD histogram. And then 2, we're seeing the MACD cross the downside for the first time since January of this year. And in fact, you'll notice that on all of the major corrections that we've seen throughout this bull market cycle, it has been preceded by a MACD cross the downside. And so, I'll just show you the examples right here. Again, it's not like going to be perfectly timing these things, by the way, but it does tell you that, hey, a corrective period is likely in bounds. So this was the last time that we saw over here. Bitcoin rallied up from that point, yes, but again, a few months of sideways and down, or more than a few months of sideways and down from there. Then we have this example over here from 2024. Same thing. Bitcoin got a rally in between two, very close to that next high. But it was 5-6 months sideways after that before resuming some upside. There is one false signal, although it did have still a decent correction here, but this one fired off basically at the low. So this one did not work out very well. So 1 out of 3 thus far, and then we have a couple more before that. There was this one right here. Again, boom, down. This one only took about a month, but realistically, it was this whole period that was a corrective period. And then you get another cross to the downside right here. Both of them, by the way, in fact, all of these, except for one, coming down to the green moving average on the 5-day time frame at minimum. And in many cases, wicking lower, but, not really deviating too much from there, except for this one right here. But again, just a wick lower, that's fine. In this case, the green moving average is at about $99,000, and it's going to be rising up, obviously, with each and every passing closure. But that is going to be an area of interest, going onwards and forwards from here, as long as this MACD has crossed the downside. Could it be that we get, an iteration like this? Yes, absolutely. But again, on this channel, we focus on statistics and probabilities. If you're not that kind of person, get the fuck off this channel, because you're a fucking redact who can't even understand this shit to begin with. I apologize for using very, very direct terminology here, but lobotomized fucking morons cannot understand statistics. Look, nothing is guaranteed, but we do need something to be going off of. We do need something to be basing decisions off of. And I would prefer to do it off of hard numbers and hard penises. And for those who do not want to do that, you can get the fuck off this channel, because I'm not going to change that. And look, yes, there will be times where it is wrong, obviously, and sometimes it'll be spectacularly wrong. But of course, like I said, has to be based off of something, at least in a tangible way. That's the way that I think. And, I hope that many other people think that way out there as well. Because otherwise, I don't know, you're just going off of like fucking, fairy dust and pixies and shit like that. Good luck, I guess. But I'll stick with this, as imperfect as it is. Anyways, so that is in there, and as long as that is positioned to the downside, 3 out of 4 times, I would say pretty damn good. Something that I'd like to pay attention to. And also, the one that did fail over here was objectively different than the other ones, because the other ones did have bearish divergence, or at least were like making new highs on the rally on the histogram before turning down as well. So yeah. Anyways, again, this current iteration over here, multiple drives of bearish divergence, having to cross the downside on the next closure in 2 days. And, it is what it is, man. It is what it is. Anyways, moving forwards from there, and hoping to not use any more inflammatory terminology, which I do apologize for. But look, it's just to illustrate the point, that's all. I have a very limited vocabulary, and that's the way that I express things. Anyways, so here's the other thing. When we go to our RSI, looking at Caretaker's RSI here, we see kind of the same thing. And RSI divergence is usually more robust, meaning that it's more efficacious than MACD. 5-day time frame, multiple drives of bearish divergence. 10-day time frame, also going to be having 1, 2, 3 drives of bearish divergence come off these last few highs. This one, admittedly, not closing anytime soon. It'll be the next 7.5 days. But look, if it's still looking something like this below 115 in basically a week from now, you have 5-day and 10-day, and obviously weekly as well. And that yellow moving average is a nice natural target, and right now that's down around about 103, 104,000. Again, it will rise up a little bit with each and every passing closure, but for right now, that is positioned to the downside, obviously. So I am personally biased towards a deeper correction after a bit of a bounce. Can that bounce get all the way up to 118, 119? Sure. But as long as Bitcoin's basically below the current highs, nothing really changes in my eyes. And I'm more or less expecting, kind of like the flavor of this cycle corrective phase, where we get, in this case, this was a 210-day consolidation. This was a 230-day consolidation. This was a I mean, where do you even stop on this one? 150, 60. I mean, maybe you go all the way over here and it is about 200 days. You know, maybe it's going to be similar over here as well. Maybe it's going to be a little bit less. Maybe it's going to be a little bit more. But what I can tell you for damn sure is that, you know, we've only been here for a little over 30 days. That would seem a little bit on the lower end to me. So yeah, you can draw whatever conclusions you want from that, or not at all. You know, you can also just say, "Fuck you, Crown. This is bullshit. I fucking hate you." The moons say down. So it's going to be rough, okay? I'm looking for points of hopium. They always exist, obviously, but it does seem rather low probability right now. Anyways, also to finish this one off, you know, we do see on all the higher term timeframes, stochastic momentum continues to be angled to the downside. And like I said, I actually do think Bitcoin's going to bounce here and catch a lot of people off guards, and probably even a decent bounce. But you know, these are going to be resets most likely. Daily time frame shows downside as long as Bitcoin's below 120. 2-day time frame is just coming down hard below 120,500. 3-day time frame also coming down hard, losing the bullish control zone below 119,100. 5-day time frame also going to be losing the critical zone on the next closure, 123,550. 10-day time frame crossing down to the first time since January of this year. 122 is the pivot. The bi-weekly time frame also coming down for the first time in a long time, 114 almost. The monthly time frame, hopefully this one doesn't turn down, but that one's currently at 95,800. So maybe we get a reconnect on the on the monthly 5 EMA here. So here's the thing. While I do think that there's a bounce, you know, obviously I can be wrong about that. Price action pivot here on the 5-day says a great area of interest in the short term at around 111,900, basically your lows of August. As long as Bitcoin's closing above there, I think that a bounce from here is a little bit more likely than not. It's just, I think that bounce will fail. But of course, if Bitcoin closed below that number, then, you know, I guess I just have to be looking for that correction to continue onwards and forwards, meaning more downside in the short term rather than a bounce. Fair enough. You know, that could be it as well. So I'm very much agnostic to that. It's more so the medium and long term here that's starting to set in. And yeah, you know, I totally understand that some people are not going to, you know, like what they hear. And in which case, just turn off the channel. Be like me on X. Just block out anything you don't like. That's the way to live your life in pure ignorance and bliss. That's how we love things. But yeah, anyways, actually one last thing regarding a bounce, like let's say Bitcoin does bounce from these lows. Here would be the Fibonacci areas of interest. 382 is at around 116,700, 50% retracements at 118,200, and 618 is at almost 120. So, you know, basically if Bitcoin were to bounce even up all the way to like 120, I would still be saying that's a lower high, and that's kind of where you expect on a, you know, on a bull trap basically. So yeah, yeah, I think that's a good place maybe leaving off on this one. Again, in the short term, you know, does Bitcoin kind of fish out a few more wicks here? I think yes. I do still think it's a little more likely to bounce from here as well. The only way that I'd invalidate that if it did close below that August low. Until then, probably bounce first over the next week or two, then come down, play out a much more prolonged sideways and downside consolidation, and hopefully sets up Bitcoin for another, you know, major rally. I don't know, maybe around the end of the year or beginning of next year. You know, I think that's kind of like the silver lining of the long term, is that it just continues to set up for this like nice stair stepping up behavior that generally is a good sign, actually. Just, you know, we're not really getting those parabolic moves like most people expect. So fair enough. Anyways, that's what we'll be leaving off on today's video. Holy shit, this one was way too long. I do apologize about that. But now that we are very much at the end here, I do want to once again give just, I guess, the final sort of indications of this, you know, of this special announcement, just for the TA nerds who are staying, you know, one, during around during a time like this in the market, and then two, you know, staying towards the end of a nearly 20-minute long video. But yeah, I will be massively upgrading. In fact, it's not I will be, I mean, it already is there. I just need to enact it for this program. This is a trade like a quant program. It is an informational program. It is not it's not like these guys over here, which are, you know, more or less indicator scripts, which are very, very valuable, but this one's more like the how-to, the theory. And as of right now, it is just focused on quantitative analysis. And on September 1st, right before my birthday, I am going to make this like my premier 100% life's work program, where I include everything else from other programs. That means I'm going to include obviously not only the quantitative trading and analysis that's already in there, but also classical technical analysis. So bringing in, you know, stuff from the prior program. And by the way, yes, you will get a discount for all of that. You won't pay twice for the same shit. Obviously, we're also going to bring in options. Same thing there as well. These are these are very fucking long, by the way. We're also going to be bringing in psychology. So all of those things will be enacted day 1 of September. Then more long term, I do plan to add my sort of experience, I suppose, with long-term investing. But of course, I've only been doing that now for about 5 years. So I feel like, I need more time to really get deeper into that. But so far, I actually feel quite good with it, but, need more time, I think. But over time, I will be adding to that as well. This will just be like the life's work. This is going to be the main thing. And yeah, so we'll leave it right there. As always, I want to wish everyone the best of best. Take care, much love, and see you hopefully Friday for another live stream.